Converted Man here. Alright, everybody. We've got Atheists Humbled with Basic Logic by Big Jon Steel. Oh, yeah. Alright, can't wait to see how we get humbled by logic. Let's check it out.
I want to introduce you to a new fallacy. Well, it's not exactly new. Atheists have been using it for years. But as far as I could tell, no one's actually given this fallacy a name yet. And if I'm wrong about that, I'm sure someone is going to let me know in the comments. A fallacy by definition is a mistaken belief, especially one based on unsound arguments.
Well, that's one definition, but it's more nuanced than that, and who cares, really, it's just, look, appeals to definition, it's close enough, I guess. No, I want to be pedantic about it. No, look, it's more nuanced than that. All right.
Before we get into naming this newfound fallacy that atheists have been using for years, let's go into describing exactly what this fallacy is and show you guys some examples of it. Okay. So the argument basically goes like this. God could have done X, but God chose to do Y. Given the option, I would have done X and would not have done Y. Conclude.
All right. So, this, is this an actual argument that somebody has made at any point? No. What this is a construct straw man. It's not an argument that anyone has laid out in this way, but he's doing a hasty generalization of a broad brushstroke of what he thinks are commonality of arguments that are out there. These are statements or ideas that people might have put out there, framed in different ways. And of course, if you examined the totality of it and looked at the context, you'd find the underlying argumentation there, perhaps. But we're not going to do that because that would take effort and energy. Instead, we're going to make up an argument that nobody's actually used and pretend that that's the argument that people are using. Then we're going to cherry pick things that seem to align with our straw man construct and then say, well, there you go. There's that argument in action. Now, I do agree that on the surface, this, if it was an actual argument, would not necessarily follow. God could doing X and then doing Y does not mean that God is not real. However, it could mean that God is not worthy of worship because it's dependent upon what you consider worthy of worship. So I'll grant the second conclusion there, but not the first. So you can't have both be fallacious. Only one of those conclusions would not follow. Alright. There we go. Back to the video.
Conclusion, God is not real or he's not worthy of worship. Now, do you see how this argument is fallacious? First, it assumes that we have the best moral standards or judgment calls to claim an absolute truth. That what we personally believe must be the best and only way. Now, you might say,
alright, you're assuming a lot there about the person and their motives and their feelings and their intuitive nature. And I have wanted to label this as a fallacy myself for a while. And that is mind reading, special knowledge, knowing something that the other person knows. It's something we can't do. We don't know what someone else is thinking or what they feel or what their motivation is. If they say X out loud, then we could at least say, well, they said that, but they could be lying or mistaken about that. It's like, I, did that robbery. Well, that could be just a lie, it could be exaggeration, it could, be anything. I wanted to rob that bank. Well, that might indeed be the case, but it might not be. So knowing somebody's true motives is just something we humans are incapable of doing. So, yeah, you don't really know what people are thinking. But anyways, all right.
Say this is not just my belief, this is common knowledge. Everybody knows that X is better than Y. Or bare minimum, they know that Y is wrong. The problem with that argument is it falls under a different fallacy called ad populum, which basically says that...
Wow. You're all over the place there. So, okay. Within the construct straw man that you've created of this argument that nobody has ever presented, they're saying I would have done this differently. Not everyone would have done this differently, or the vast population. So you're not even arguing against your own straw man construct argument now. You're arguing over a thing that they might say, and it's completely made up because you don't know what they'd actually say, because this is a construct straw man of an argument. So you're making up what they would say, and then your response to that made up statement, this is so silly. Come on, man.
That if the majority believe it, then it must be true. Now, I don't think the atheist here would want to use an ad populum argument because it creates a whole new world of problems for their own worldviews. For example, an anti-theist will often bring up as an objection that if God is all good, why didn't he say no slavery in the Bible? But he doesn't. On the contrary, the anti-theist would say that God condones it. Now, the problem here is that if the anti-theist is to hold to ad populum arguments, then they would have to concede that slavery is not wrong. Because for the...
Woo-wee! Okay, so assuming again that they're relying upon ad populum argumentation, we in our modern day society, broadly speaking, condone slavery, but God, or condone, yeah, we shun it. We're against it. But the Bible says, no, it doesn't say it's bad. It just says do a different version of it and gives ways to do it. Which means you must accept that the moral standard that God has, that your God has, is that slavery, under certain conditions, is moral. So, the question is, do you hold that slavery, under the conditions outlined in the Bible, is moral? Yes or no? If no, then you disagree with God. And then that's an issue that you have to outline why it is you disagree with God. If you are fine with slavery, well, then that's something I would like to know. Very much so. So, simple question to you, to this guy here. He's not going to listen to this video. So, Big Jon Steel there, are you okay? In fact, are you accepting that the objective moral standard of reality is that slavery, under certain conditions, is fully, objectively, morally correct? Yes, you agree, or no, you do not agree. I would love to get your answer to that. I won't, and none of us will. We all know that. So, why is slavery wrong? Is it because the majority thinks so? No, not necessarily, although that might be something to look into. Because, well, at one point, the majority seemed to be fine with slavery. Well, maybe not the majority, but certainly the people in power were fine with it. I'm pretty sure that the slaves weren't in favor of it. But, nonetheless, why do we think slavery is incorrect? There is a detriment to human flourishing that occurs when slavery is allowed. That is to say that humans suffer unduly and unnecessarily under slavery conditions. They're dehumanized, they're mistreated, etc. And that does not benefit the individual, nor does it benefit the whole. So, because we have recognized that that's a thing, we have moved away from it. Now, granted, we are selecting, arbitrarily perhaps, the benefit of humans and non-suffering as something that we value. Well, why do we value that? Because we want to benefit ourselves to some extent. It is, in a way, selfish. I don't want to be a slave ever. Therefore, I don't want anyone else to be a slave ever. Because I don't want it to happen to me or be at risk for it happening to me, so I don't want it to happen to other people. It's somewhat of a selfish thing, but also it is that I care about other humans and I don't want them to suffer needlessly. And that is subjective to some extent, that I've decided that that's the value that I assign. And once I assign that value, then the morals do flow objectively from that value, that I want to promote human well-being and non-promote, demote human suffering. I want to lessen that. And that's my value that I'm setting. I could set a different value, and that may or may not work in the long run. So, we'll see. It is not that we need a thing that's even greater than humanity itself to say, well, but X is really actually moral. This is the thing that's actually true for real. We don't necessarily need that to have coherent ethics. But DCT, Divine Command Theory, which I've made a video about called DCT, and I outlined the problems of that there, is an issue because the ethics there are whatever God says is the right thing to do. Period. End of story. So you're left with the arbitrary whims of your God. Of course, also, you have to know that it's actually God. How do you know that? God says to good old Abraham there, take your son, go sacrifice him. Abraham recognizes the sovereignty of God and does it. He goes to do it. He doesn't want to do it, but he knows it's what must be done. It is the right thing to do. Now, the next part of the story, God's like, yeah, just kidding. Here's a thing to sacrifice instead. Because you were faithful to me, you get to have the reward. Well, so God didn't really intend for him to sacrifice his son. It's a test. Even though God knew what Abraham would have done in that situation, God still had to test him for reasons. But I view that story as immoral, because God had earlier said to not kill or not to murder, depending on which translation you go with. And I would say, but God, you said not to kill people. You said that that's bad. I love my son. I'm not going to do that. Then the moral God, in my view, would have said, well, that's, you passed the test. I was seeing if you would obey me blindly, or if you would stick with what you believe is correct to do, and you chose to disobey, and that's in this case good, because you chose the ultimate value of life over obedience. But I didn't write the story, and the story is about obedience, blind obedience to God. And so if you think your God orders you to kill some other group, you go kill the other group. Slaughter them all. Leave none alive. Not the women, not the children. Complete utter genocide, that's in the Bible, by the way. Yeah, that's perfectly objectively moral under the Christian view. So just accept that and admit that that's fine. That genocide, if ordered by your God, is objectively correct. That's your system. You have to accept that. I don't. I view that as immoral and disgusting. And I don't need to appeal to a different God to do so. Theists or endless apologists, broadly speaking, are so confused with objective moral values, thinking that we need a thing that's outside of humanity to say what good or bad is. We've been fighting over what's good and bad forever, since we've been able to fight. When we were primates, before then, we've been fighting with each other and other creatures, trying to figure this out. And slowly over time, we have sorted out what is beneficial for most of us. Not all of us, we're working on it, but we're getting there. And what we're doing as we do so is, yes, we're changing our ethics and or morals to adapt. The problem with your holy book, quote unquote, is it's static. It is unable to adapt to the changing times. It says nothing about what to think or do regarding microwave ovens, nuclear power. What do we do with this? No idea. Are we allowed to manipulate our genome? Don't know. Doesn't say. The Bible's silent on a number of modern issues. What about abortion? Doesn't really say one way or the other. What's the age of consent? Says nothing on that at all in the Bible. Doesn't say what age is appropriate to get married to somebody or to have sex with them. Well, it says you're supposed to have sex after marriage, but okay, fine, you marry them and then you have sex with them. But what age are you allowed to marry somebody at? Doesn't say. So, how do you derive the objectively correct thing when you have to guess? And appealing to God doesn't do you any good because you'll get one answer, somebody else will get a different answer, and, well, how do we know which one is correct? So we might indeed have to appeal to the majority to say, well, most of the Christians agree that X age is the good age. Let's go with that. Yeah, sure, God didn't say it, but what else are we gonna do? My objection to God doing X rather than Y is under my ethical system. And you would have to show the flaws of my ethical system logically. And there are some issues with it, which I'll grant. But you also must accept that DCT has perhaps more flaws in it. Here's another one. If some other religion says, well, our God says to kill everyone that wears striped shirts that are green with white stripes, then that's what we have to do because God said to do it. And you're like, well, wait a minute, my God doesn't say to do that. Well, too bad, buddy. Well, now what are you going to do? You can't convince them not to follow God, and they can't convince you to not do the thing that you think is fine to do. So then they're going to try to kill you. And that's what religion has done to humans. It's pitted us against each other in wars over what the imagined deity has told us to do or not to do. So that's a huge problem in divine command theory. And granted, the other ethical systems out there have their problems. I don't think that there's any that are perfect, but they're certainly better in many ways than DCT.
The vast majority of history, most people had no contention with slavery. During the time of Paul, it was estimated that 1/3, if not more, of the population was slaves. The anti-theist cannot appeal to objective morality to disprove God, because
I don't need to appeal to objective morality to disprove God, but that's assuming that this argument is attempting to do that. But then again, this is a complete construct argument anyway, so it's not my argument. My argument that you're alluding to is perhaps the argument of evil, which I have covered. And yeah, that one relies upon words meaning what I think they mean rather than words being something else. The problem is you are asserting that God is the arbiter of what is wrong and right, something that I don't believe in. All I need to do to appeal to is say, this God doesn't align with the moral values that I have. Therefore, it does seem that I should not worship it. As far as it not existing, well, if God is meant to be moral, yet these morals conflict with my morals, then someone is wrong. Either that God is wrong or I'm wrong. Now, it's possible that I'm wrong, but upon examination of my morals and or ethical values, it doesn't seem like I'm wrong. So then it would follow that that God, or that version of God at least, doesn't exist because it isn't moral. It isn't what I consider to be moral. Oh, that's subjective. Yeah. And so that's all. That might be all we have. But there's another option that you're not considering. What if some morals are objective and others aren't objective? Then does God sort of exist?
It would presuppose an objective morality, which creates a whole new world of problems for the atheist, but we can get into that in another video. And B, it leaves no room for the option of the possibility of necessity for undesirable things. An example of this would be to ask the question, is it better that someone achieves health, fitness, strength, and endurance through exercise? Or is it better that someone could achieve the same goal by taking a pill once a week and putting in no work at all? A good way.
What? So the necessity of certain things, i.e., the necessity of suffering, which I covered in my video where I talked about the problem of evil. I think it is vile and evil to try to justify evil by saying that it's necessary to achieve some end. No, it's not. There's a different way to do it. Now you're asking this odd question. Which is better, to work out to achieve muscles or to take a pill? Well, if the ends justifies the mean, then they're equal. But the easiest route to go is to take the pill. Why would you spend effort and energy to get the result that you want? All you have to do is take a pill to get the result? I'll take the pill. That's easier. So it's not better, it's just easier. So this question is malformed and loaded, and your analogy is somewhat broken. Either there's no answer to that question at all, or the answer is the easy solution is the better solution. Either way, your analogy then fails because we have an alternate way that we would prefer. Let's say that a different example. So, there's a girl that doesn't believe in God. And she finds one day her own father decides to lock her in the basement and do terrible, awful things to her. And she's there for an entire year. During that year, she found a Bible in the basement. She started reading it. She's calling out to God. And then one day she's saved by a priest. So she becomes convinced that God answered her prayers and she comes to God. So is the suffering of that woman a good thing because it led her to a particular version of God. Whereas if she hadn't gone through that suffering, she wouldn't necessarily have come to God. But wait a minute. Let's rewind and say, okay, the woman doesn't believe in God. Her dad doesn't kidnap her and put her in the basement and do terrible, awful things to her. But she goes through life, and as an older woman, she reflects upon things and mortality and wonders if there's something after this life, and talks to a chaplain at the hospital where she's staying at because she's pretty old and she's been sickly a lot lately. And that chaplain convinces her that there's a God, and she comes to God after a long and peaceful life. Which was better? The pain and suffering to get her to the end, or the nice life that got her to the same end? Which was better for her from her perspective? Did she have to go through the pain and suffering to get to the end? No, there was an alternate way. Now, we humans, ideally, hopefully, are loving, caring about other humans. We care about their needs, wants, and desires to some extent, maybe some more than others. I would not put somebody through something torturous to get them to an end that I could get them to in some other method, because doing so is not just viewed wrong by me, but wrong by them, and I dare say everybody else. Was that an appeal to popularity? In a way, but it's like, look, what else are we gonna do? Who would say that that's fine? Who would say it's fine to torture someone as long as the result is good? I'll tell you who. Apologists like this guy would. It's absolutely morally fine to put someone through hell in order, as long as you give them something good, or it leads to some good result. It's morally, objectively fine to inflict and or allow terrible, awful pain, suffering, death, whatever, as long as there's something good at the end. Then that's perfectly fine. That's his moral system. It isn't my moral system. That's his moral system. I view all that as completely wrong. And you say, well, that's just subjective. All right. So what? That's not an argument. Saying, well, it is X doesn't negate it. You want to pretend that your system is right by fiat. It is good because God said it was good. Was it good because it's good on its own, or is it good because God declared it was good? And yeah, your system I object to on an ethical, moral basis. It could still be true, though. I have other arguments against it. And in the in the argument from evil video thing that I did covering that, I go into more detail, but essentially, if we say that the God cares about humans and cares about, loves humans, means what I think it means, then when I look at the things that your God has done in the Bible in the way that it's simply presented, I do not see a loving, benevolent being acting. I see a sort of trickster, Loki type God that seems rather narcissistic. It needs people to do certain things. It's a control freak. It's not a good being from my perspective. But you view it as a good being. And your argument for that is what? The Bible says that God is good. You're told that God is good. You're not demonstrated that God is good. The things that God does don't look good, but then we make an excuse and say, well, but it might lead to something good. Okay, so God's fine with the means justifying the end. But why? Why use those means? Couldn't different means lead to the same end? Why would God allow suffering and pain to get to end when it could do something else? And the answer is because God. That's it. That's your answer.
Way to think of this is a child may not understand why he or she cannot eat cookies every night for dinner. To the child, it's still food and they prefer the taste over proteins and veggies. So from the child's perspective, it seems unfair and unjust that you would make them eat a balanced meal every night. But you have a higher state of knowledge. You can tell your child no cookies even if they don't understand why. And you might argue back, but yeah, I can explain it to my child and eventually they will learn. But the theist can say the same thing, that God is working with us and he's sanctifying us and eventually we will learn too. Now,
but in that scenario, the parent would also be invisible, inaudible, and have written down this information via other people that wrote it down years after the events supposedly happened, and those events would match other events that had already how the analogy's broken, right? Well, here's the thing, though. Kids and us, we enjoy sugar. Oh, yeah. Why? Well, because sugars are very powerful. It's very easy for our body to burn sugars. Our evolution made us susceptible to sugars because that's why we eat things that are high in sugar. And so we desire that stuff. Naturally, we gravitate towards that. If you don't expose your children to sugary sweets, then they won't know that that's a thing, but they still will desire the more sugary foods than the non-sugary foods. Things that high in starch, proteins, and sugars, they will desire that because that's built into them via evolution. So, if you were allowed to construct your child from the ground up with whatever desires or lack of desires that you wanted, you could make their brain desire a balanced diet rather than one that's solely reliant on the sugars. That the emphasis of the brain and the body would not be governed towards one extreme, but rather desire a well-balanced nutrient variety. You could build their body so that it desired the things that the body needs most, couldn't you? Why wouldn't you? If you could do it, why wouldn't you do it? Do you have to build them in a way that where their body desires something that if they eat too much of it, it will be bad for them? No, you don't have to build them that way. You could build them a different way. So why wouldn't you build them the different way? Oh, well, see, my knowledge that they require multiple food groups is greater than theirs. Yeah, so why don't I build them with the desire to eat all those food groups? Because, well, if I did it that way, well, what would be the reason? Exactly. Huh. It's almost like when we critically analyze what you're saying, everything falls apart. No honest evaluation, logical explanation, I don't think, could explain. The fact is, yes, I do have greater knowledge than the child. But I wasn't able to build the child from scratch to give it the desires that I know would be most beneficial for it to have. What greater knowledge, supposedly, God has than us humans is all the knowledge. It knows everything. So it must know something that you and I do not know that required it to build humans, that they would naturally desire sugars more than a balanced diet that would fit better with their biological makeup. What in the world would that be? It's a mystery. It's the great mystery of God. So then the answer is that there's no answer. You don't know why God didn't do it this way. So I say, listen, buddy, I, as a loving being, would not do it that way if I could. Oh, but you don't have all the knowledge in the universe, right? Okay, and neither do you. So how do you know that that's good? Because you're assuming and you're asserting that there's an objective moral standard that makes it good that God made humans desire sugars more than a balanced diet. And you're not aware of what that is. You just have to assume that there is a good that God will eventually let us know at some point in the future, once we're dead and with heaven and with God. I guess those of us in hell don't get to know. Maybe we do. I don't know. Why not tell us now? So that we can evaluate God and say, oh, well, that makes sense. That is moral. I agree with those morals. Right now, I evaluate your deity in the only ways that I can. You, on the other hand, by fiat, assert that your deity is good, even if the things that your deity orders are not seen as good by any other human other than those that think the way that you do. The reason why the non-theists, the anti-theists, continually hammer at, for example, the slavery stuff, is to show the world that you follow a backwards system that's fine with slavery. Why? Because God said to do it in a certain way. That makes it fine. That makes it good. Whatever God says to do is good. I object to that in full. God saying something doesn't make that thing good. In fact, I'd say we would need an objective standard. Because what's God going to appeal to justify its morals and ethics? Well, itself. But that's subjective. Aren't we complaining about subjectivity when it comes to humans? That's why we're appealing to God in the first place? Oh, but then God can't appeal to anything other than itself, so why can't I appeal to myself then? Ah, same problem. You've just set it back one step.
Finally, even if I was to concede with the anti-theist that Y was the less desirable outcome, that wouldn't disprove God. At best, it would just show that you and God disagree on something, in which you might reply, well, at least it shows that he's not worthy of worship. In which I would have to ask, what makes someone or something worthy of worship?
Kind of a tangential red herring question of sorts, but because I feel like it, I guess I'll go into it. Nothing. Nothing makes anything worthy of worship. That is to say, there isn't anything that is worthy of worship. There is no set attribute for me that makes something worthy of worship. At least the sort of worship that I'm familiar with. And I'm not going to look up any definition of worship. I'm just going to go with my own understanding of it. So you can have a different understanding of it, but you're trying to understand me here. So grant me this. From my understanding of worship is full commitment to, adoration of, submission to X. That I spend time and energy and effort solely committed to this thing. That is the most important thing in the world, that nothing else compares, the universe, etc. Nothing else in reality measures up or could measure up. That it's perfect, flawless, that it is to be emulated in every way, shape, and form. And that I submit to that. I kiss its ass. I love it. It is the best of the thing. And when I look at the universe that I know, I think about the things that I'm aware of, there are certainly things I put up high on pedestals, if you will. Logic might be one of them. And I've made a joke in the past that, the logic is my God, and that science is my religion, or something like that. It's like, because I value logic a lot, but I don't worship logic. I don't worship anything. So I don't think that there is anything worthy of worship. But I would say, even though that doesn't necessarily answer what it is, I can tell you what it isn't. Anything, anyone that wants worship is not worthy of worship. Anything that demands worship isn't worthy of worship. Period. End of story. Now, there's this song, and I've referenced this before, but Bo Bourbon, this guy, made this song called From God's Perspective. If you haven't heard the song, go check it out. Okay? It's a good song. If you haven't heard it in a while, re-listen to it. It's a good song, I think. And in that song, he says something that I think is very insightful. Well, first he says, what if God doesn't believe in us? And I thought, wow, that's an interesting idea. But also in the song, he says, from God's perspective, he's God in the song. And he's saying, I know you want my love, but I'm not going to give you the love. If you want my love, you have to earn it. Then, when you earn it, you won't need it. I thought that's very profound. If you want God's love, earn it. But once you've earned it, you will not need God's love. That's extraordinarily poetic and profound in my view. And I don't believe in God, but I do believe in love because, well, it's demonstrably demonstratable. So what does that mean? Well, it might mean any number of things to you personally. To me, it means a number of things. And so it's this idea of once you achieve the pinnacle point, once you found the thing that is worth worshiping, you realize you don't need to worship it. I was told as a Christian, worship is not for God because God has everything. God doesn't need your worship. Worship is for you. It's to feel good. Of course, I was also told that God does want worship and needs worship. So I've been told both ways, but I'm left with Jim Kirk's question, what does God need with worship? On one side. And on the other side is, what do I need with worship? Other things make me feel good, and some make me feel better than worship did. So have I achieved the point where I don't need it? Perhaps so. I don't miss worship. But if and when I found the thing that I thought was worthy of worship, maybe I'd find that I didn't need to worship it because finding it would be enough. I don't know. Anyways, enough pontificating upon such matters. Back to the video.
Is it just whatever aligns with your current beliefs? And if that's the case, isn't that textbook narcissistic behavior?
No, textbook narcissistic behavior is your God. Have no other gods before me. Have no other deconverted men before me. Don't say anything bad about deconverted man. Set aside a day to think about deconverted man. Alright, now that I've gotten that out of the way, also you do other stuff, whatever, but mostly worry about how awesome and amazing deconverted man is. Deconverted man wants to love you, but it's a conditional love. You have to do something first. Deconverted man's kind of weird. He wants you to do a number of things, actually. First, foremost, well, you got to buy his books. I mean, duh. But you also have to read The Lobsterist. All of them. Yes, all of them. They're on my profile. Go read them. Then, also, because Deconverted Man's a little bit insane, you have to make a video about how awesome The Lobsterist is and or try to refute it. Nobody's done that, by the way. Oh, yeah, then, wait, there's more. Oh, yeah, wait, I'm unhinged now. You have to dance naked in a video and send that video to Deconverted Man. Wait, no, only if you're a girl. If you're a guy, I don't want it. I don't need the naked video if you're a guy. So that's like there's no girls that watch my videos. So, maybe there's one girl. But she's probably married and she doesn't want to send me a naked video of her. But if she loved me, she would. It's not narcissistic. I'm just acting like God acts. Alright, you don't need to do any of those things for me to love you. Only some of those things. Yeah. Which are those things? I don't know. Depends on what day you ask me. I've gone off onto the weeds again, haven't I? Maybe I'm on weed. No, I'm not. I don't smoke weed. Yeah, what drugs do you take? None is the answer. Back to the video. All right.
Let's look at some examples of this being used in the real world.
Why not? Why do we as humans not have the capacity to understand the most important questions that come up about this supposed God? It seems pretty convenient for the theist response to any question that isn't able to be answered to say, oh, well, it's just because we don't understand this God because we're just humans. Riddle me this. Why did your God decide to create humans with the inability to understand it?
So as you can see in this...
Hey, remember when I said that his argument was a complete and utter construct straw man? Well, here's an example of somebody not giving the argument that he's outlined. He picked this TikTok video to show as an example of the argument that he brought up earlier. Yet, in the video, it doesn't do the argument that he talked about. She's asking a completely different question, and a question is not an argument. Questions contain premises, perhaps, but they're not an argument. She's asking, why didn't God do this? I don't know. That's your answer. You don't know the answer why God did it that way. And so the honest answer would be like, yeah, you're right. We don't know why God did it that way. That's a good point. I don't know why God made it so we don't understand God. That's a good question. No idea. All right, sorry I couldn't answer that question. Some questions don't have answers. Yeah, that's the way it be, no matter what. So, I don't know. There you go. But no. Instead, we're going to use your video and try to pretend that it's somewhat like the argument that we made so that we can then make these statements that we want to make.
Clip, Eve brought up the objection. Why didn't God give us the ability to fully understand him?
Is he not capable of making creations that can understand him and what he does? In which case, he doesn't sound like an all-powerful God. Did he not want to create beings that can...
Hey, did you guys notice the sudden edit there? Now, that could have been her, or that could have been him, but I'm sure that he links to her original video, right? No, he didn't. He didn't link to her video. So I can't check to see her original video. Oh. Seemed like an edit. Don't know who did it. Anyways, alright, so yeah, why didn't God do it this way? And then therefore it seems like God's not all powerful. It's a reasonable conclusion there. And you might say, well, yes, it does seem from your perspective that God's not all powerful. Fair enough. Maybe God isn't all powerful. That might be the case. Or maybe this or that is the case. Or, let's demonstrate that God is all powerful then, despite your misunderstanding of it. How about that? An argument in favor of God's all powerfulness would be valuable here. Right?
Understand him. In which case, that doesn't sound like a very loving God. Because a God that advertises relationship, but also refuses to be able to be understood, doesn't sound like a God that actually wants relationship. It sounds like a God that men made up and ran out of answers for the plot holes.
So her entire video is the objection that God could have done Y, but he didn't, so he's most likely made up. This argument...
Well, that's the very uncharitable version of her argument. And I don't know if I'd even call it an argument per se. But, yeah, I mean, we could categorize it as that. So, God didn't do this. I would expect him to. So, it seems like God's made up. Yeah, well, fair enough. Now demonstrate that God's not made up. But you're saying that she's using fallacious reasoning to come to her conclusion. Just because she can't think of an answer to it, that doesn't mean that there is an answer to it. Fair enough. What's the answer? Do we know or not? Or is the answer going to be more bald assertions about what God is or isn't? Which way do you think he's going to go?
It leaves no room for the possibility that it might be better to not know and to grow in knowledge than it is just to have it. From the perspective...
Well, there's some problems with that answer. If you want a relationship with someone, yeah, there's things that they're going to get to know as they go on with you. But I need to know information in order to trust you or love you or whatever. And this thing wants me to think that it's the best thing that there is, but it's not giving me the information that I need to make that conclusion. In fact, the information I'm getting is directing me to think that this God is evil and vile. So it can't be the actual God that is good that's out there, if God is good. If God is evil, well, then this God is that. But the Bible says God is good. But the sort of good that it's talking about is not the sort of good that I'm familiar with. So then I have to either reorder my brain to think that a different sort of good exists, without any argumentation, or I have to rely on my own intuitive, flawed ideas, which God also allowed me and gave me in the first place. Ugh. So either God's a moron, God's a nitwit, or it's not this version of God. Or both could be the case. Maybe God is a nitwit and it's not this version of God. That could be. Yeah, okay. But I don't know. Just.
Perspective of the Christian, we have an eternity to get to know God. What fun would it be to fully understand an infinite being within 80 years of our existence?
80? Speak for yourself. I'm going to live to 1,112. You're assuming and asserting that you have an eternity. But doesn't that mean that God never has to reveal any information about itself because it could always do it tomorrow? If you have an infinite amount of time, then you never get to tomorrow. So, if you fully understood God at any point, then what's the point of the rest of eternity then? If understanding God is something that you're looking forward to, at some point, hypothetically, you'll understand everything there's to know about God, which means that the rest of eternity would be useless. So it should only be a trillion years. And then you've gotten to know God fully, so the rest of time is pointless then. Oops, it's almost like you didn't really think of this through, because either I'll never really get to know God fully because you never get to the end of eternity, or some of eternity is pointless if indeed getting to know God is only interesting because you can learn something new about God tomorrow, but then you're always learning something new about God, so that means you would never actually know everything that there is to know about God, even though that there's an eternity to do it with, which then makes the question of, why can't we know everything about God to be, well, because we're never going to know everything about God, because then eternity would be pointless. I guess that would be the answer, right? Yeah, I'm pretty sure I'm right about that.
It might be possible that God gave us limited ability so we can find endless joy in exploring the infinite that is Him. And in my opinion,
yeah, there you go. So the endless joy. So you'll never find out everything there is to know about God. So her question, why can't we know everything about God, is because if you found out everything about God, then eternity would not serve a purpose. So the reason why you'll never find out, in fact, you'll never find out everything about God. The whole point is to spend eternity being, exploring God. Oh, that doesn't sound narcissistic at all, God. And also, I would enjoy that? I don't know. I mean, aren't there other things to find out about? I mean, is God that interesting? Not the God of the Bible. I don't think. But why would God be presented in such an awful, terrible way? That doesn't make sense. Well, it doesn't have to make sense. It could still be true. Of course, that would require us to have a demonstrable demonstration that it's true, which we don't have here. But please continue digging yourself a deeper hole. I enjoy it. Wait, wasn't this video to have us be humbled by logic? Seems like you're the one being humbled by logic, but I could be wrong. I'm not wrong, but I'm just saying, it's possible.
Opinion in the grand scheme of things, that seems more preferable than just knowing it all now. Now, there's another...
Well, to you, maybe. But, I think that there's other things I'd like to do, too. But, that's just me. I don't know. Plus, I don't know about eternity. Is there, like, a button I can hit if I get bored to stop existing, just in case? They had that in the Good Place show. So can we have that in the actual eternity? I don't know. It just seems like it would be a good, handy option.
Another quote made popular by the infamous atheist debater Matt Dillahunty, and it goes something like this. If God is real, He knows exactly what it would take to convince me that He exists. God has not done that, therefore He most likely doesn't exist.
Well, that's not really what Dillahunty has said, but again, you're straw manning people, so it's not really surprising you'd straw man Dillahunty. if God cares about me and wants me to care about it, then the only way I can do so, even hope to do so, is to know that there's a God in the first place. If I am unsure about God, then there's no way I can have a relationship or even attempt at a relationship, since I don't know anything about God. I don't know if there is a God. So how can I have a relationship? I don't know which God it is, let alone if there is one. So the conclusion is, there's something off in my understanding here. That the proposition that there's a God that wants me to have a relationship with it is an interesting proposition. Hey, deconverted man wants a relationship with Paul, who I haven't seen in a while. Hey, Paul, how's it going? Remember you were wrong about that thing, however long ago that was? Yeah, I'm still mad about you being wrong. You remember that? Let's pick that fight again. Let's fight about it. No, I'm just kidding. Just kidding, Paul. Yeah, we haven't seen Paul in a while. Yeah, good to see you, Paul. Hope you're doing well. Yeah, don't remember that thing that I just said to remember. Forget about that. Yeah, no, I'm just messing around. Inside joke. But yeah, well, I didn't, before I met Paul, I didn't know he existed, right? And before he met me, he didn't know I existed. And through time, we've had some messages back and forth and talked, actually talked to each other with voices. And so, to some extent, we've had some sort of relationship, whatever that is, whatever the label of that relationship is, And it's only possible because we both invested the time and energy to do that. If one of us didn't respond, it would be maybe a parasocial relationship, which is a thing. So a parasocial relationship is what many YouTubers have in relation to their audience, usually the bigger YouTubers out there. They have, tens of thousands of subs and people making comments, and maybe they'll respond to one or two comments, but there's no way they're responding to all of them. There's just too many. So they form what's a parasocial relationship, where it's kind of a one-way street. You go into it knowing, I'm going to give this person my energy and effort and attention, but I'm not necessarily going to get anything out of it. The only thing I'm going to get out of it is the enjoyment I get out of their entertaining video. So you might throw money at them, you might be their Patreon, you might do things so that they'll notice you, and they might not ever notice you. And this has kind of been known as simping when it comes to men trying to get women's attention, for money. They'll throw money at them, and then the woman will give them attention, but only because they gave them money. So it's a very bizarre relationship. It's not really a relationship, it's artificial. So a parasocial relationship is one where you're giving them stuff, but you're getting only the entertainment from them. You may or may not get a shout out from them from time to time, but they're not going to go from that to talking to you on a daily basis or dating you or anything like that. And to hope for that or expect that is illusionary. But I can't. So a parasocial relationship is what it seems like that people have in regards to most of the gods that are out there. You can say anything to God and you hear nothing back. You can do anything for God, but you don't seem to receive anything back, at least not things that are necessarily tangible. I mean, you might feel good for a while, but when you can generate that feeling through other methods, it brings up the question whether or not you that's a valuable thing to do. It's hard to say, but it's a very much a one-sided relationship, and I'm not interested in a one-sided relationship where it's not just that I'm in a parasocial relationship, because unlike with a person on YouTube, that I enjoy their content, I don't enjoy the content of God. Like the God of the Bible, there's a static being here who in the Old Testament is very much not a good character, not that interesting. A lot of the Bible is dull and boring to me. And then the New Testament doesn't really seem that much better. Jesus is kind of like meh. He's like kind of like, don't worry about tomorrow. He's, it's like wish-washy. He doesn't pwn people in the way that I'd like him to pwn people. Some of the things he does and says are funny and poignant, but nothing that really goes wow to me. And, I used to really enjoy Revelations before I learned it was probably about King Nero, but because I tried to understand it and figure it out, and it was like this mystery, and it excited me and whatever. But these days, I just don't find any of the Bible that interesting. It's kind of boring and dull to me. So, if the only thing that I have that could connect me to this being is something that's dull and uninteresting, then that being's going to have to do something more if it really wants me in its life. And it's not doing that. So it must not really care about me, or it must not really want to be part of my life, or it must not have the power to do so, or is just this really just dull, uninteresting being that I have to pursue without any good reason to do so. Why would I do that? And for other gods out there, well, heck, I'm not going to spend my time reading about every single god. If they want me to know about them, then they better tell me. But when all I have are words of humans, that's not enough for me. I want to hear from the horse's mouth. So I'm going to reference another song here. The Ill Mind of Hopkins 7. I believe it's 7. Let me double check here. Yeah, I was right. Ill Mind of Hopkins 7. And if you haven't listened to this song, you should check it out. And if you haven't listened to it in a while, you should recheck it out. And one of the things he says in that song is, I never hear it from the horse's mouth, just other guys who are supposedly anointed. I'm not going to read the Bible because humans wrote that shit, So I'm paraphrasing, but that's Hopkins' thing that I linked to. Hobson, I think. I say Hopkins. That's not right. What was the other one I brought up? From God's Perspective, Bo Berman. Let me just share that link so that people have that too. All right, Bo. All right, so yeah, it's unconditional love with conditions, right? Exactly. So it doesn't align with somebody that wants a relationship with me. So I have to conclude that it doesn't. I have no choice but that. Because, I don't know what it's like, actually. I know what the Bible says, but that might not be what God actually is. And the sort of God that Christians tend to describe is not the God of the Bible at all. So I'm like, well, they're familiar with a God that's not written about, that's like this loving, caring being. Okay, where's that? It's not there. It's not Christianity. That God isn't interested in me at all because it hasn't shown itself. But wait for it. He's got a reason why God's not going to do that, and it's going to be stupid.
This is the same type of fallacious arguing that Eve was using in the clip beforehand, basically stating that God doesn't do the things that I think he should do, therefore he must not exist. And once again, it holds to the same problem, where it doesn't allow for any purpose in which God may have chosen Y over X. For an example, with Matt's objection specifically, God may not have revealed himself to Matt because God is giving Matt what he wants, which is a life independent from God. Matt has
what? So, but Matt cares about the truth more than anything else. At least he said so. And I don't know if I can't read his mind, so I'm just going with that. I care. I'll just stick with me because I can't defend Matt Dillahunty. I'm not going to, anyways, but I value the truth more than anything. I want to know if there's a God. Now, I don't know if I'll have a relationship with that God or not. I have no idea. I have to get to know God, which means it has to have a conversation with me, like Paul does. Paul and I can have a conversation. Why can't I have a conversation with God? If I type something out or I say something out loud, I get no response from God. That's not a relationship then. I don't know what it is, but it's not a relationship. Or at best, it's one-sided, and I'm not interested in that. But then you're saying, well, that's what you want. No, that's what it wants. But then, what?
Has said on several occasions that the God of the Bible is not worthy of worship. And even if God was real, Matt would not seek out a relationship with him. So God...
Okay. So God could reveal itself to Dillahunty and us as well in a way that Dillahunty would not be mistaken about it, and then say, okay, now you know I exist. All right, cool. I don't want to worship you. I don't want a relationship with you, but I'm glad to know you exist. Cool. Now he's going to have to argue that God exists, but that, it's not worthy of worship or praise, which would still be good for God's side, and it would give Dillahunty something new to do that would be more interesting than what he's currently doing. And maybe Matt wants that even more than he doesn't want a relationship with God. But doesn't he want to know that God exists? Whether he wants a relationship with God or not. So God's not giving what Dillahunty really wants. See, I can just assume what Dillahunty wants as well, which is all you're doing here.
God may have hid himself from Matt for the sake of Matt, giving him exactly what he desires. A life...
But I desire... whatever. I already said it. Whatever. I desire the truth, so whatever.
Without God to dictate how he should live. Also, the problem with this argument is the fact that there are millions of people who claim that they've had an interaction with God.
Yes, there are millions of people that claim to have interactions with all sorts of things other than God as well. The problem is, it's not the same God. You want it to be... No. 33%, give or take, of the world is Christian. So the rest of those gods don't count. Sorry, buddy. I know you want to conflate all the gods into one, but if they're having an experience of Shiva the Destroyer, then either they're having a real, genuine experience of Shiva the Destroyer, which means your God is not the only God, which would have to falsify your God, because your God says it's the only God, although actually in the Bible it says have that God above other gods, so maybe there could be other gods. Or they're having a non-experience of God, which means their experience seems like it's God, but it's not actually God. So then you're going to have to devise some system that allows us to know which experiences of God are genuine or not. Let me know when you figure that out.
That convinced them of God's existence. I personally would be one of those people. Now, we don't have enough data to say the exact percentage of people who have had an experience with God versus not. So for the...
Yeah, an experience of God versus not. Actually, what we do have is is scientific studies that can show us that we can reproduce the God experience in people that think that there's a God and people that don't think that there's a God. There's this thing called the God helmet. Oh yeah, gonna mention this thing again. So basically, it uses, I think, magnets to mess with your head and give you an experience of the divine. And people that have used it have self-reported feeling God. And what's interesting about this is we can also, and there's also been a placebo God helmet where people were told this helmet is the God helmet, blah 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 blah, but the helmet did diddly squat. It looked like it did stuff, but didn't actually do anything. It flashed lights or whatever, but didn't produce the magnetic thing that the other one did. But they would report that they had experienced God. So is God deciding whenever the God helmet turns on to have the person experience God, and that when the person thinks that they're supposed to experience God, God is giving them that experience, making it genuine? Or is it that this is a naturalistic thing that our brain can do on demand? When we demand our brain or expect our brain to produce the feeling of God, it will. And when certain magnetic fields are applied to our brain, that will experience God. Could that be the case? And if so, then we have a naturalistic explanation of where the quote-unquote God feeling comes from. That means those that have said that there is a God are just misattributing God with a natural feeling that our brains can create. Nah, let's just ignore all that. Let's ignore all that and just pretend that they're experiencing a genuine God, even though we have no information about that genuine God at all. We're just going to pretend that the experience is good enough without studying further into what that experience might be. Oh, no, yeah, let's just do that. Yeah, no study, no test, no data, nothing. Blah, blah, blah.
Sake of illustration, let's pretend that me and Matt are the only two people left on the planet. Well, this would mean that Matt's litmus test fails 50% of the time. Currently on the planet, there are 5.8 billion people that
wrong. Because Matt's thing is, God doesn't care about him because God hasn't revealed itself to him. Sure, God cares about you. It's revealed itself to you, but not me. So, okay. That doesn't matter. What you experience or don't matter to me. I don't get to do that. So frustrating. Oh well, whatever.
Associate with a religion. That means that 84% of the human population has been convinced that God exists. Now, we don't know exactly why these people have been convinced, but the fact of the matter is they have been. So how do we know that it wasn't God doing exactly what Matt is protesting that God is not doing? And it might just
no, how do we know that God is doing that would actually be the question. And it's a decent question. But you don't have an answer to it either way, do you? You have no demonstrable demonstration to show that it is God or is not God. More to the point, you have no way to demonstrate that it's your version of God, because those people that you're referring to believe in different gods and things that aren't even called God. People have had experiences of aliens, all sorts of things, crystals and mystical whatever. So, what's all that? Is it God? So, is a Muslim experiencing God? The same God that you're experiencing? And so, is God allowing people to be tricked into the wrong version of God? As long as it's God, who cares? Well, then God isn't the God of the Bible then. Why would it allow people to have experiences that are the wrong experience of God? Why would God have humans let off the... Well, I guess God has a purpose. He wants them to be able to experience itself, but under the Muslim viewpoint. As long as it's... Yeah, I mean... But then why doesn't God let everybody experience God? Well, there must be some reason for that, too. We don't know the reason, because we don't have any test data or information about it. and we're not going to bother to do any digging on it because who cares? I'm interested in that. I have a plausible explanation, a naturalistic one. Your brain, and my brain, and the brains of humans, can produce what we would call God. When subjected to the right frequencies of magnetism or drugs or just our own desire to feel God, which if I want to do it, well, I can generate a feeling in myself, but it takes a moment of meditation to do so. Let's see if I can do it. Okay, I got a little bit. Not as much as I wanted. It takes a little bit to do it. But is that God? No, it's just me wanting to feel a thing. And some of you will be able to do that, and some of you won't be able to do it. But it makes perfect sense under naturalistic ideas that every brain is different. Some people are going to be able to generate the God feeling, and other people aren't. But if there's an actual God, then you're saying that God has some reason why it's not having certain people experience it, but you can't possibly hope to know what that reason is, which means that the complaint is justified. They don't believe in your God because God doesn't care about them. Read Salvation by Langston Hughes. And if you've already read it, maybe read it again. And here's a link to that. All right. Maybe I'll read this. Wait a minute, is this only one page? No, yeah. It's short enough. All right, I'll read that next stream. After I'm done complaining about this guy, I'll read that out loud to everybody badly. I don't know if I've already done that or not. Whatever. Only 1 minute left. And only 5 hours left of my analysis of this guy, which isn't really an analysis per se. It's mostly complaining about...
Just be the fact that Matt will never be convinced unless God interfered with Matt's free will. Even if God...
Fuck free will! Screw free will! So if God can't interfere with free will, then God cannot answer prayers.
Showed up in front of him, smacked him in the face, and said, "Do you believe in me now?" Matt...
Why would God smack him in the face?
Could chalk that up to a psychotic episode and leave it at that. Let's take it a step further and say that God reveals himself to the entire world and leaves measurable and repeatable evidence. Matt might chalk that all up to a conspiracy theory by the government.
Yeah, but then if he did do that, then he'd have other things that he now has to believe in order to justify that. Whatever.
Similar to how people do now with flat earth theory. No matter what information you give them, they're never going to change their mind. So,
similar to how people, like apologists, like somebody named Big Jon Steel, will continue to insist that there's an invisible, intangible, unproven, unprovable thing called God, no matter what information you give them. Yeah, I agree. There are people like that out there.
Why would one waste their time trying to convince them in the first place? Now, I'm
not... because the truth matters?
I'm not saying these outcomes would actually happen. I have no insight into how Matt thinks. My point here is to show you there are many...
Then you should have said all the things that you said!
Possibilities that are not logically contradictory on why God might choose Y over X. So unless he...
Well, they are logically contradictory if I assume that God cares about me within the framework of what I consider to be loving and caring, which, again, I outlined in that other video where I talked about the problem of evil. And I guess I'll link to that, I suppose. I don't know if I'll link any of this in the description or not. I mean, feel like linking it in chat's good enough. I don't know. What was I saying? Evil. Oh wait, there's another video I did. Problem of Evil Part 1. That was so near. No. What? Fuck. What the fuck? What? Oh man, I've got all sorts of things here. Oh wait, I've got a bunch of things on the problem of evil. Explain it with cats. What the hell? Where the jeez. Now see it says Oh, there it is. I named it something else. That's why I can't find it. Alright. Oh, I was named as Fuzzy Wuzzy in that video. Great. Lovely. Oh, man. Where's the thing? There's the thing. There's that. There's that video that I was talking about. Wait, I think... Did I link to the right one? Yeah, I did. End with A. Where's the thing? Where's the thing? Where's the thing? No, 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 no. Don't play. No, no, no. No, 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 no. No, no, no. No, no, no. Okay, there we go. Alright. Alright, okay. And back to this.
A human can have all knowledge. It's pointless to say that God should have done, but because he didn't, he doesn't exist. Now, as far as I could tell, this fallacy technically doesn't have a name, but it does follow all the criteria.
That's probably because it's not a fallacy.
Criteria of a fallacious argument. So I'm going to propose two names for it here today. The options are the unhappy atheist fallacy or the Dillahunty. You guys can place your votes in the comments.
How about the straw man, which is what you've done here? That's all your argument has been one ginormous straw man of other people's arguments. You're the one that's already using an existing fallacy that already has a name. Well done. Alright, well, anyway, so that's that video. Kind of curious to what the hell I said about the cats. What was that video about? Alright, now I'm gonna have to watch my own video. Anyways, so this video that you're now listening to, and if it was too long, then blame Fish Head Salad. So this is Fish Head Salad's fault, and it's your fault. It's your fault. I went for, let's see, how long have I been doing this now? Oh God, an hour 26. 1 hour 26 minutes. Also, some of that time is to say out loud what I am emailing you right now at the end of the video, because it's funny to me to do that. Lols. 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 Anyway, check it out. And put the link to the video that I'm doing here into the thing when I do that. Alright, thanks everybody. I'll see you next time. Don't forget, be skeptical of all the cats. And if God doesn't do X because you would think that he does Y, it's just because there might be a reason that you're not thinking of. And because of that, then maybe God doesn't actually exist, but maybe God does exist. And I don't know. I mean, sure. But we should strive for good argumentation. So we might have to rephrase this argument to be more precise, so that people can't strawman us. But they'll still strawman us anyways. So, instead of that, whatever. Do something else. And, the thing, and do stuff. Thanks to everybody that watched. Thanks to Paul, Prince Vegeta. What the fuck? Okay, that's a new name to me. Welcome to the thing. Hope your Dragon Balls are doing well. My balls are inert. Nerdy wrote it. B.S. Lewis, Web Expert, whoever that nerd is. Nitty, and who else was in here? Captive Desk. I think that's everybody that I saw in the chat. Welcome. Thank you. Make sure to leave a comment once this video is a video and not this, because then that will help the YouTube to know that I'm a thing, and then more people will come, and then that will be good. Maybe. Goodbye, everybody! I might do a video again later, reading the Langston Hugh. I might not do it, though. You never know. Whatever reason I do or don't do it, it's for the greater good of all humanity, maybe. Just trust me, bro. Finn! Alright, that was a good one. Yeah, that was a good one. We're still online? Yeah, we're still online. Ah, God